Good morning, Sonia. So today I will be discussing the job sharing DMA230 brief. So for this job sharing brief, I had chosen option B, and I'll be discussing the following: the showroom, documentary, online community, podcast, scavenger hunt, and best of the best. So firstly, I had done the showroom. To be honest, it was my least favorite. Within the showroom, I had visited different sites. I had found that it was difficult, as I would find mostly interior design showrooms instead of graphic designs. So that was a challenge for this part. Thus, I had looked at agencies and various graphic designer websites in which they would showcasing and selling merchandise, prints, and so forth, and their designs as a whole. So thus, I had visited the agency, Leslie David Agency, where I saw artists Hisham Akira, Barosha, Leslie David, Leonard Cook, Jesse Ursurello, Deanne Chick, and two different websites of Josh Curran and Evelyn Turinges. Thus, I was really inspired by the work presented, such as the work on the right is the work I had found in the agency, which was my first favorite parts. The other works, such as Evelyn I can't pronounce, I'm going to butcher her name, but her work was really inspiring, but yet it was not my taste of design in terms of style. Although Josh Cochran, I hope that's how you pronounce his surname, his work was quite funky and illustrative, and he was showcasing, selling his work, such as his whole website was a whole profile of himself, thus how showcasing his work. That's the highlight again, very visual inspiration. How it's amazing to see other artists portray the work and how they provided to be seen to the public. The lowlights was that I could not find very much showroom websites. What I had learned is that graphic design is not just glued to any digital medium, but across various different mediums. And it's important to showcase yourself through these showrooms in terms of your work, so people can get an insight of who you are and create clientele. For the documentary experience, it was a very great experience. I had done the documentary Abstract, The Art of Design, and the graphic designer was Paul Isher. She's very, very famous postmodern graphic designer. She had the agency Pentagram. She focused a lot on the importance of font, and she's really heavily inspired by font and how it can create character within the work. She had worked for CBS record label company and creating album covers, thus being most famous for her posters for the theater production, Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. In my experiences, it was really great to see her become this artist and graphic designer in a male prominent industry, and that just made me be like, yeah. The highlights was I was really inspired by her work with the album covers, and thinking about how the process went must have been really interesting. And the lowlights, I wish it was much more longer, the documentary. What I have learned is that as the industry has evolved, working from useful physical mediums to going digital, the graphic design industry has really come from there. Everyone is different from their styles. I have also learned typography is really important to create characteristics and imagery, and it creates an image as a whole as well. Therefore, the online community I have done the websites Behance and Dribble. I really enjoyed this part, as well as I had never really used Behance and thought this was a new experience. Actually, I should be using Behance because I gained a lot of visual inspiration that I never thought I would, such as learning to look at different examples of brand identity and how to create a really flowable one, and as well as looking different types of fonts and different types of projects that these designers have worked. As well as I looked at Dribble, I looked at artist Ricardo Santos, which I was really inspired by his work just because he made prints, and his work really related with photography and collages and different types of mediums, which I really love, and I was really inspired by his work. I followed various hashtags as well. The highlights was getting inspiration from these websites, seeing various styles and how everyone is different. And thus, the lowlight is that I couldn't access other sites due to you must have a subscription. What I have learned is that I learned how to see a better brand identity, and I definitely gained a lot of inspiration as the last semester had gone through a terrible creative block, and I got heavily inspired by what I had seen through these sites. Thus, the podcast, which had to be my favorite part, 100%. I really enjoy podcasts. It was the Off Air the Juicy Designer podcast by Abby from Abby and Design and Katie from Wildflower Design. The first episode I had listened to, they had talked about the design process and how it's really important to get to know your client. As they had discussed, they had even created workshops, but as well as different documents to get to know their clientele, but as well as having proper ways of getting through to them and getting to know them as a company and creating a relationship. Thus, as well as creating a perfect presentation in terms of a mood board and not focusing heavily on aesthetic, but on the design process. As well as they had another episode in which they discussed about is your dream company or brand you'd like to work with, and they said name four. So for myself, I named Converse, a jewelry company, a fashion makeup company, and a tea company. The highlights is that I overall enjoyed every part of the podcast. I learned very much from it. The low light was having to differentiate which host is who, because they both sound the same. What I have learned is to not focus on aesthetics, but to focus on the design process. Getting to know your clients is very important. To have a contract, social media can help you be seen as a designer out in the public to boost your clientele, and it's important to know your niche. I really recommend this podcast. Thus is the scavenger hunt. So the first one, the image that appeals to me was a mug of the K-Bears that I've chosen. So I took closer detail and I saw different parts of the illustration, and then even closer I saw the smoothness of the cup, that it was printed with a sticker, and then extra details such as little detail on the hats and the stomachs of the Care Bears. Such as the object I've noticed immediately was the watermelon pillow, just because of the color, and I thought it was really good for using for inspiration. Second, the next one is the scavenger hunt, which the second part I made a second side. Something interesting that catches my eye was a One Direction poster in which there was illustrations in the background, which I love how photography can mix with different mediums in print. And look down something interesting, the color of these unicorn slippers. I wish I could design this, was a Justin Bieber tote bag. And what the person was thinking must have thought that of color in order to relate to Justin Bieber's actual brand as an artist, but as well as something that is not over extravagant. And the design makes me excited to work in this field is the shoes I bought from Converse. It is collaboration with Tyler the Creator, just because of how much detail this box can have, and I just really want to work for Converse one day. The highlights, taking of images on various objects was fun and interesting. It was interesting to see various design aspects around me. The lowlights, my family laughing at me while I run around the house. What I've learned is that design inspiration can come from anywhere, and taking a closer look at designs can open a wider variety of inspiration. Thus, when it comes to best of the best, overall, I think of best of the best as a niche and something that inspires you as an artist itself and why you're here today and your overall aesthetic. And I'm really very passionate about my own aesthetic. And looking back, I would think of, because I personally wanted to be a designer ever since I was 6 years old. I wanted to be a fashion designer in the beginning, and I would always draw and I would do everything I was really inspired by music videos as a young age. I would watch VH1 a lot. Princess Raspberry Beret music videos, something I think that would describe me as an artist, just because of the clouds and so forth as my overall aesthetic, and something I like to use through my art and illustrations, and as well as magazine covers, just because of the fonts and so forth. And collages really inspire me. And if someone had to ask, so what? But this is how graphic design and how these graphic design elements are interpreted through these images really creates an artwork of its own and creates a visual language to people and really inspires people to create an imagination within their own minds. Thus, the highlights, seeing various design elements in the images have brought me into the position I am when it comes to design, which makes me really happy. The lowlights is deciding which images, because I had so many. And what I've learned, basically base is why I'm here today. It inspires me in what I love the most. Using these elements of base of this is passed on to be my inspiration for my work and overall aesthetic and niche, and keeps me going with inspiration to design more and be heavily focused on my work. Thus, in conclusion, my favorite activity was the podcast, and my least favorite was the showroom. I really enjoyed the overall experience. Thank you.